Okay, first of all, I'd like to welcome all of you all to your clinical education course, okay, which is your Friday morning class. And today, as Jan has done in the past, she's asked the Digmanns to come and talk with you. So this is Dan and Jennifer Digmann. And I was actually asked to do the introduction. One, Jan's not here, and two, primarily because I've known Dan, and Dan actually and I were just talking, and we think we've probably mentioned, what, 10, 11 years, something like that. I didn't meet his lovely wife until about 3 years ago. And I have to say that Dan's straightened up a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. Just a side note with Dan. Dan and I, how I first met Dan, Dan has done some work, as I've told you all, I do a lot with the National MS Society and Michigan chapter, and as does Dan. And I first met Dan after I had read an article that he wrote in the MS Connections, and the title of the article was The Batman. And Dan is actually known as the Batman, and I'll let him tell you why. It's a very interesting story. So at the end, we will open for questions, so when everybody's ready. Or do you guys want to take questions as you talk? Which way would you like to do it?
I suppose just save it to the end.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So we will do it at the end. Okay, so hopefully all of you have looked at Dan and Jennifer's podcast. And with me not talking any longer, and we all know how hard that is for me not to do, I will let Dan and Jennifer take over. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll minimize ours.
Okay. Hi. I have so much respect for teachers right now. You guys, it's like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, holy crap, I couldn't do this every day. But anywho, I'm Jennifer, and I have MS, obviously, and I just want to take you back to a day in 2002. And I was there. We were having a presentation. I was a volunteer for the MS Society. We had planned a program called Finding Your Buried Treasure. It was a program intended for women to help us reclaim the things we had forgotten, or the things that we put on hold when we were diagnosed with MS. But again, it was a program intended for women only.
Yeah, and the planners forgot to put on the announcements and flyers for this that it was intended for women only. And so... And I had gotten a flyer, and I thought, okay, it's all the way down in Frankenmuth, and whatever, I don't really want to go. But Karen, the programs manager for the MS Society, Karen Babels, had called me, and she was talking with me, and I think she thought, well, I'm thinking that, well, we had men registering, and we need to get more men there, so there's not like 2 guys. So who would come? Dan, I'll give him a call. So Karen calls me, and she's like, have you thought about buried treasure? And I thought, okay, yeah, I can go. And I went down there, and Karen was at the registration table. I'm talking with her, and she says, you know, why don't you see that table right over there? That's Jennifer's table. And she's younger, you both have MS, you probably have a lot to talk about. So I went, and I'm sitting there, I'm the only guy, I'm the only person at this table. Meanwhile, everyone's like mingling, and I'm feeling like such a loser because I'm the only one sitting at the table by myself. And I'm thinking, well, where is this Jennifer? And she rolled up to the table, and I was like, wow.
So you have to flash back or rewind a little bit. So I'm nervous, and I'm waiting to start this program, and I'm supposed to lead a discussion for women, a small table discussion. And so I'm waiting, and people are filing in, and the group is growing, and I'm like, wow, there's going to be a lot of people here. Well, then I see this cute man walk in, and I'm like, ooh, he's cute. And then I'm like, it's a program for women only. I wonder whose husband or boyfriend he is, but I'll be okay. So I get ready, and I start to move over to the table for the presentation. And as I roll up to the table, who's sitting there but the cute man? I'm like, ooh, yay. And so the vice president of the Michigan chapter is sitting at the table. The keynote speaker for the program is sitting at the table, and the cute man's sitting there. I'm like, oh, no pressure. And so we start talking, and fortunately it was a really good group, but sometimes there'd be little breaks in the conversation, not awkward, but I'm just like, oh, please, someone ask a question or speak. And that was the cute man. He was always there, and he always kept things moving. And so not only was he cute, but he was like a really good source of conversation.
Well, because I knew how nervous. I mean, you got the vice president of the Michigan chapter, and national keynote speaker at her table. I'm thinking, man, she's got to be nervous. Just look at me, and I'll make it easier for you. And so it's just like, no, ask me the question, and it was really good. And when it was all said and done, I hung back because I'm just like, well, I'll help clean up. I could have gone home, but I'm just like, no, let me take the chairs because I wanted to get Jennifer alone, because I didn't want the next time I saw her to be another MS thing. I mean, she lived down in Grand Blanc. I'm in Mount Pleasant. What are the odds? And so finally, I saw her. It's not like I cornered her, but I finally got her alone, and I wasn't like invasive, I guess, because I just said I wanted to get her email address.
I gave my phone number.
And so 2 days later, I found every reason to figure out how to email her, and eventually emails led to phone calls, led to dating, led to engagements, led to marriage, and here we are over 4 years later since we got married. And one of the biggest things, I mean, the reality is we both have multiple sclerosis, and I was diagnosed with MS when I was 27 years old. It was back in 2000, and I have relapsing remitting MS. And my symptoms my hands are always numb, and as I get tired, my feet and legs get numb, or legs, because I have both. They get numb, and or my chest will get numb just because, but I can go to sleep, wake up, rejuvenated. It's just the only thing that stays numb is my hands, kind of like they're asleep. So that's the extent of what my MS issues are.
And I was 23. I had just graduated from college, and that's when I was diagnosed. And in the beginning, the doctor said it was relapsing remitting. Well, it was so aggressive, and it just wreaked havoc. And then 5 years after I was diagnosed, I kind of turned the corner from relapsing remitting to secondary progressive. And no kidding, 5 years after I was diagnosed, I lost the ability to walk. And I went to so much therapy, and I did just oodles of physical therapy, but I just could not regain the coordination or put it all together to walk. So that's my biggest symptom. I have had, like I said, in the beginning it was really aggressive. I had double vision. That was one of the first signs. I had numbness in my hands and feet. I had a little bit of, I couldn't walk. I felt like Frankenstein. I used to smoke, which I don't advocate to anyone, but I used to smoke. And I remember I was at work, and I went out for a smoke break, and it was like I couldn't bend. Like my knees would not bend to get me downstairs. And I was like, well, that's weird. I guess I gotta take it easy. And so I had a variety of symptoms. And then I was diagnosed, the double vision, there were 3 symptoms, or 3 separate incidents. I had like a numbness in my feet. My doctor explained it away because I wore bad shoes. Like, okay, fine. So then I went back like 6 months later, and I said, Doc, my hands are numb. She's like, oh, because I was getting close to graduating. She said, that's because you're just doing so much homework. And back in the day when I went to school, we didn't have computers. Well, we had them, but we used blue books, and we wrote papers like longhand. And she's like, you're just doing too much homework. Give it a couple weeks, and I'm sure your numbness will go away. Sure enough, it did. And then I started my big girl job down in Farmington Hills, and I was at work one day, and all of a sudden there were 2 distinct images. And so I was like, okay, this is freaking me out. And I drove home, which I, again, don't advocate. I closed one eye so that there would be just one image. And I drove home, and I went to an ophthalmologist, and he said, it's either a brain tumor or you have MS. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess the MS would be super. And Isn't it silly? I was like kind of happy when someone told me I had MS. And so from that point, right from the beginning, I have done physical therapy. I've had 6 physical therapists that that I either went to their clinic down in Grand Blanc or they came to my house. And then since I've moved up here, 2 of those therapists were in Mount Pleasant. I've done therapy in the hospital. I had done plasmapheresis to try and like slow things down. And then I did a course, well, actually 8 treatments with a little more, I would say a little more potent drug to kind of slow the MS down. And thank goodness it has.
When I was first diagnosed, I was about 40, 50 pounds overweight, but I was just like thinking and looking at how bad, MS could become. I was thinking I need to do what I can now to get more healthy or to get, prepare myself. And so I went to a physical therapist and I went and they were good, but what they did was I was standing there doing my sessions like with like little weight machines, like 1 pound kick with my legs, and I'm thinking, this really is quite easy. And there's like, oh, well, it builds up stamina. And I was like, dude, this is like, so I'm like thinking, was I that progressed that I couldn't do more? And so I had stopped going because I'm like, just the 1 pound weight, certainly, and, I'm sure that's what it was, but I needed more than that. And so, granted, I quit going, but then, I never went out looking to do more until September 28th, and I met Jennifer, and I got home that day, and I went for a walk that night because I was thinking there's a girl that hopefully I'll have to stay healthy for. And so I started walking, by myself, and eventually the walking, I'm like, man, Sports Center's on right now, and I'm out walking. If I got these if I ran, I could get these done a lot quicker and get back. And so, and then eventually, I was 2 miles. I was like, well, gosh, another 1.1 miles. That's a 5K. I so can do this. And meanwhile, I'm dating Jennifer, and that's what it was. And during that time, I wasn't going to physical therapy, but I asked my neurologist, because how they say, before you start exercise program, check with your physician, blah, blah, blah. So I checked with my neurologist, and they were like, they says, well, you do need to do physical activity and everything, but don't know if I do running, because you might, you could fall and break a leg or whatever. And I was like, point well taken, point well disregarded, and I went out and ran another 2 miles. So it was just, for my experience, knock wood, it's just that I was able to push myself, and it's just like, I think that's where, physical therapy is probably something that's really difficult. We're like, the opposite ends of the spectrum of what the disease is. Jennifer's in a motorized chair, and I'm running, 5Ks. I ran my first 8K at the Crim this last year, and it was one of the things where I feel like that's my litmus test. I don't like run all the time, but it's just like, I finished in like, under 44 minutes and like got 9th out of 31 in my age group, and I have MS, and it's just like, but it's just like, because I can push myself, because I'm totally different from Jennifer, and that's where the job of doctors and as physical therapists in dealing with people with MS, it's just totally different.
And I imagine it's frustrating. As therapists, like, I'm a patient who really, honest to God, you can give me the exercises, and I will promise you, and I will mean it, that I will do my exercises, and I will do them, and I will be good, and I will come back to you in like a month, and you'll be like, have you not been doing your exercises? But I have. It's a progressive disease. So you make progress with me. You take 2 steps forward, and then you take 3 steps back. And that's the really difficult thing. I always say, whenever I talk to any physical therapist, like, MS, neurological patients, we'll be your favorite patients because you'll see us forever. I mean, my first physical therapist, I started seeing her and she had just graduated like you guys will. You know, I was one of her first patients. She came to my wedding. I went to her wedding. She walks the MS walk with us every year. I mean, you get a really close relationship because it's not like you're going to cure me. You're not going to say, like a broken bone, help fix that. You'll see me, and maybe I can't lift my right arm, so you'll get that working. But then in 6 months, I can't walk. And you'll work on that. Or it's just a constant thing. And that's, I imagine, frustrating. And why I've seen so many therapists is because everyone has something different to help with. And just, I could use as much advice as possible. And I think my first therapist, I love her, and I'm totally, I mean, she's a friend. But one day, we were at the MS walk, and she said, she was working with me at the time, and my mom said, because that's what moms do, oh, how's it going? Is Jennifer doing good? And Heather said, yeah, it's going really good. And my mom said, oh, you're going to get Jen up walking soon. And Heather said, I don't think she's going to be able to walk again. Well, I heard that. And I was like, then what the hell am I going to therapy for? You know, and that's the question. That would be one piece of advice I would give you. Is don't ever let your patients think you don't think they can do it. I don't go into therapy anymore thinking, oh, wow, Lori's going to get me up walking. I know that's not realistic anymore, but Lori has to think, I'm going to help her the best I can, and this can be possible, you know, whatever the goals are. But if my therapist doesn't think I can do it, then I'm going to think I can't do it either. So just that's the one thing I would say.
And I think it is really trust, like, I feel like just trust your patients to, you know, don't follow textbook things to say, oh, well, they shouldn't be able to do this, they can't do this. I mean, really trust the patient and encourage them to push themselves, and, you know, don't encourage them to go out and run a marathon or anything. I mean, that's just silly. But you just to know their limitations, or, you know, I mean, bless the two therapists I had worked with originally, but, you know, I think they saw and read, oh, well, multiple sclerosis, and just do this and let him, you know, like those, what are those, TheraBands kind of things, drape them over the door, and you're just like, snap. You know, but I mean, seriously, because I had just been diagnosed. I was 27 years old, and the reason I even went in to the doctor for my numbness was I thought for sure I was a weekend athlete because I had overdone it on the basketball court that weekend and pinched a nerve. And so it's like, look at them, evaluate them, and it'll take extra time, but just individually look at them and say, what do you think you can do realistically, and give them the chance. And if they come by with a broken, yeah, okay, this was a running accident actually, just because, you know, because with the MS, you know, I get left side weak and I drag my left foot, and it's like my left shoe always, yeah, you know, it's like my left shoe wears out in the toe. And one time, just, you know, clipped something on the sidewalk and just face first on the pavement. But, you know, and so there, I suppose if you want to call that an MS related thing, I'd say no, because I don't think they were the right shoes. And plus, you talk to any healthy runner that's out there that doesn't have MS, they fall too, you know. And so that's the one thing that I learned for me personally with MS. It's just like, I always think, oh, well, I can't do this today. Is this because I have MS? It's like, no, everybody deals with the same thing, you know. So, I mean, always, you know, make sure that you're not throwing, you know, with the patient, if they have an issue, don't always blame it on the disease. And, you know, so that's my 2 cents. But as far as weekend athletes, okay, because we can talk about this and the whole Batman thing. So I, you know, weekend athlete, and I'm sitting there, and I go to the doctor's office, okay? I'm sitting there in the waiting room, just kind of reading a magazine that's like 2 years old because they don't update them that quickly. And you know, I was just sitting there and just kind of, you know, kicking my feet around, and because their chairs are tall too, and it felt like, you know when you put your sock on, but you don't like pull it up all the way, and you put your shoe on, and the sock folds over your toe underneath there. So I had this bump in my thing, and I'm just like, well, that's kind of annoying. No big deal. So then I get done. They call me in from the waiting room into the exam room, and I'm sitting there, and you know it's going to be another 20 minutes before the doctor actually comes in to see you. And they had already said, you know, take off your shirts and stuff because they're going to check your chest for like rash or something. And I was like, I'm not going to sit half naked in the doctor's office by myself, so I'll just take off my flannel shirt. Well, I'm sitting there and just kind of wiggling my feet around to do. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, my sock's all messed up. Maybe I'll. So I take off my shoe and I bend over to pull up my sock, and all of a sudden I hear this chirping noise from my shoe. And simultaneously I think, God, that's funny. I don't remember there being crickets out in the entryway where I kept my shoe. And it was just, you know, kind of this. And I looked, and right there at the foot of my shoe was a bat, like a beady-eyed little bat in my shoe. And I'm just like, crap. Because you're just thinking, all you can see in a split second is, this bat's going to fly out of this shoe and just circle around in the office and stuff. So I quick grab my flannel shirt, wrap it up, and it's contained. And so I'm like, well, what do you do? And so I walk out, and I sneak out kind of back route so I don't have to go through the exam room, just because you got like a guy in a black concert t-shirt with a red flannel shirt wrapped around walking with one shoe. And so I go outside, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you can't like just tap it on the sidewalk, because you tap it, that bat's gonna fly up and just get all over my face. And so I'm sitting there at the curb, and there's people walking into the doctor's office the whole time, and rather than tapping, I'm spiking it like a football player. I'm like, and spike and run. So tell me about this. You're like, and three times I did that, and finally the bat fell out. And so then I'm like, well, what do I do now? And so I walk back in, and the doctor, do all the, eventually, it's a long story, but I had to catch the bat because the health department said, oh, well, they want to know if it's rabid or not. So I had to, catch the bat with a container that the doctor's office gave me, and slid the cardboard underneath and took it down there. And bat wasn't rabid. And the health department, they want to know the story, and I'm telling them, and they're just like, there was a bat? Yeah. And it was in your shoe. Yeah. And the woman was just like on the phone. I think she thought I was an idiot, because she's like, well, how come you couldn't feel it? And I was like, well, part of the reason I'm here is my feet are numb, And so, and they're little, because it's the wings that, and I know, because and so, with that, and the doctor had told me he wanted to do like a blood test, because he thought maybe the numbness was a blood thing. So, I got the blood test and everything, and it was at that point they determined it wasn't anything with the blood. It was the fact that the numbness was caused by the multiple sclerosis. And the lab tech had heard the story, and it was just like, because I had to go in because of the drugs I'm taking. I have to get my liver enzymes checked like every 3 months. So every time I go in there and get the blood test, it's like she knew my name was Dan, but she always got a kick out of calling me the Batman. So that's that story from way back when. So, but it was the numbness that led to the diagnosis that lead me to believe, find out that I have MS.
So that's, together it's been almost 20 years that we've had this disease, and it's a huge, it's not like the only thing we can talk about, but it's a huge part of who we are. And I just look at you guys and I'm like so excited to know that there are these people that are going to be therapists, that someday Dan and I may have to see someone, you know, a new therapist. And it's great to know that there are people out there who are training to become someone to help us. And I think physical therapy is really good. I know I don't walk, and so you may think, oh, she's schlubby or whatever, but it's like, no, there's a lot of stuff I can do. And Dan's litmus test is if he can run. My litmus test is, can I fold a load of laundry? If I can fold a load of laundry, if I can get my arms working and get everything to look nice, towels are the worst, but if I can get that, that's my litmus test that I'm doing good. And if I go to physical therapy, I don't mind using the TheraBand. And I did have to do like the little leg things in the beginning. And now I still need therapy. And it's really up to the therapist to be creative and just to, you know, just keep it fresh, certainly, because it's been 12 years and I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that before, it didn't work. But now I want to try things. I certainly always want to do it. But if my heart's not in it, then I'm just like, yeah, just going through the motions. But if, like Julie, the therapist I just recently saw, she was very creative. And it was kind of fun. I was like, oh, what's Julie going to make me do today? And so I think that that's the really, you know, where your personality shows through as a therapist. Yeah.
I have nothing else.
I have nothing else. Well, other than multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, that
and,
whole
yeah,
chronic illness.
so.
I mean, do you guys have any questions then? I mean, because that's
And
really...
you can ask anything, pretty much. You know. Oh, the one thing I forgot to say, and this is not tooting my own horn, but that'll come about. You know, I'll be pretty excited. But I was heavy when I was first diagnosed. I weighed over 300 pounds. And that's a difficult question or a difficult issue for a neurologist to broach, you know, like, oh, you should lose some weight. But a physical therapist, you guys see us and you know, like you see us struggle. And Heather, you know, she didn't really have to say it, but she knew that I needed the exercise and I needed to drop some weight. And so sure enough, she's giving me all these crazy exercises, and that's who I credit with losing the first bit of weight. And then depression, I credit that too with helping me lose some weight. But now even still, you know, I'm still on that path, and I've just finished, well, I'm not finished, but got 55 more pounds down. And it's like, as therapists, I hope that you'll say to patients, if you just start seeing them and they're heavy, like, maybe you should think about losing some weight. Because weighing 300 pounds in a wheelchair and needing someone to help me go to the bathroom or to transfer me to go take a shower, you don't want to be that heavy. You want to be as light as you can be, you know. So I think if you guys can, it's a touchy subject, but if you can bring it up, I say that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I told you that I used to be chubbier than I am now. So now you can ask me anything. Pretty much. We're all friends now. So.
Do you find that other people with MS, is it pretty consistent that they have their own little way of measuring how they're doing? Like I know for you it was doing a load of laundry, and for you for running. Is that pretty consistent between patients, or is that kind of just your own thing?
For me, it's just because we both lead the MS group down in Alma, and you know, I think that a lot of people, it's probably, they do have those things, and it is, you know, some of them are probably more personal about it, you know, and I think because that's what it is, you know. It's just like I'm not totally obsessed with running necessarily, but that's the one thing that I can do that I didn't run before I had MS, you know, and it's just like, but now I do, and it's just like, if I can stay consistent with that, then I'm doing okay, you know. So, but as far as other people, I would hope, you know, I would hope they would have that, and if they don't, maybe they should, because that way you can celebrate your the little rewards and stuff, where it's just like, okay, you know, because I don't feel like running. I mean, I'm dead to the world when I go, because I work here on campus, and 5 o'clock comes, I'm beat. I don't feel like running, but I've got the biggest cheerleader living with me and stuff, and she's always like, go out and do this, and so you push yourself, and that's what it is, because I can feel horrible. I can have worse numbness in my chest and feet and everything, but if I can go out and do just a regular run within the same amount of time, I'm stellar. I'm not getting any worse. So.
And then we have a mutual friend, Diana, and she does yoga. And I think yoga is her litmus test. If she can do her crazy, I don't know how she does it, poses, that's how she knows she's still doing good. And so I think a lot of people try and get involved in exercise as much as they can, because let's face it, a lot of insurance will only pay for physical therapy if you are having an exacerbation or a relapse. It's not like I can just pick up the phone and say, hey, I want some therapy today. I have to on my own do some exercise and get involved. Yeah.
You had something.
What are some of the most difficult transitions that you guys experienced being so young and being diagnosed with MS?
I think for me it was just the reality when I was signing up for benefits, and I had to be more concerned about long-term disability insurance because I had MS. I mean, that's like, you're 27, 28 years old, and you're not concerned about what your salary is. You're concerned about what kind of disability insurance do you have. That was tough for me. But
what's interesting is it was gradual how I lost my ability to walk. I don't ever, it was gradual. And so I went to a cane first. I think within the year of diagnosis, I was using a cane. And then I started using a quad cane. And then I started using a walker. And then I started falling down all the time. So then I knew, okay, walking is getting a little dangerous. And so that was the biggest thing. I went from the walker to a scooter, and now I can't be in a scooter because I can't transfer myself. So that was a really hard one. And then the reality that I've become dependent. I mean, I'm dependent to just do about everything. I need some help. And that's hard because I'm so young, but fortunately people are really good. People, you can get in a really poopy mood and you're like, oh, this disease sucks, I hate it. But then if I really step back and I look, I'm very fortunate that I have so much, and people are generally nice. And I go on campus and somebody is always willing to help, like open doors for me. I go to the grocery store, and even though I can lift my chair up really high and I've got orangutan arms, I cannot reach stuff that's like way at the top, which is always where craisins are. So it's me like trying to grab them, and I have to find somebody to get them for me. And it's a silly little thing to ask for help, but humanity is pretty good and people will help you. But it's hard. I think that was the hardest thing, is just to slowly stop being reliant on yourself and to have to start asking other people for help. Yeah, I would say.
Me too.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Either.
What are some of your strategies for dealing with fatigue throughout the day?
Lots and lots of coffee. For me, I usually hit. It's like we're sitting there at night, and it's like usually about 7:30, and Jennifer's like, "Yeah, I heard that." She heard me hit a wall, because it's just like. But all I do then is just give me 10 minutes. Like last night, we were working on something, and it's just like, can we just lay down for just a half hour? That's all I need. I mean, because sometimes that's all it is, just taking that break. And so I think that, I guess when you're talking transitions earlier, I think that was the hardest thing, is knowing that. When you're feeling the fatigue, you need to stop. I mean, even just this for the 5 minutes just to breathe and stuff. So that's what I do, is just, and I do all my really, really, really hard work in the morning So in the afternoon, when it's just more mindless stuff, you can just kind of coast. So that's how I manage.
And I don't drink coffee because that's one of those issues that go hand in hand, MS and bladder issues. And so caffeine is like my worst enemy. So I don't have the luxury of drinking coffee to pep me up. But I do stuff like Dan. I do everything in the morning, pretty much. I don't leave the house. I get really tired around 3 o'clock, which is super interesting because that's when General Hospital's on. So I just like, that's my rest time. And I just take it easy then. And if something, like if I'm really tired doing laundry, for example, and I can't do it, I'll just put it down. And I'll go away, maybe eat something or just have a cool drink, and I'll come back. I don't push myself through things anymore. I realize I'm too tired to do it well. So I just wait. I think that's the easiest way for me to deal with fatigue. Yeah.
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 I had a question. You mentioned the support group or the group in Alma. What is that and how often do you meet?
We meet once a month. When I was first diagnosed, I lived down in Alma, and there wasn't a group up there, but they had one here in Mount Pleasant. So I went, and really it's just for people with MS and caregivers for people with MS. And about that time, the MS Society wanted to start a group in Alma. And I thought, well, I can do that. So I thought, well, I'll start it, and because I certainly don't want to continue to do it. Well, some 10 years later, I'm still the leader because it's one of the best things. I mean, I think support groups get a bad rap because sometimes it's like this thought of people just sitting around feeling sorry for themselves, and there are groups that are like that, but I did not want that because it's just like, what are you complaining about today? And that's my thing, is I'm always afraid, I don't complain about the disease because it could progress. I could wake up tomorrow, not be able to walk or something, and look back and say, what was I complaining about today? And so that's how I lead the group, as just like, we can have our issues, we can have our concerns, we can talk about them, but it's like you move forward and how do you deal with it? And so I think that's what's so nice about the MS groups is you're surrounded with other people who are going through, I mean, maybe not the exact same things, but could relate to it. So, I mean, we meet once a month. I always joke because it's like I'm taking contraband into Alma because I grab donut holes from Robert's and take it down to Gratiot County. But, we sit around, we drink coffee. I mean, and I think we've just become such good friends. It's just more like a morning coffee group where, I think we meet from like 10:30 till noon. And there's been times where we look, it's like, 11:45. It's like, oh wait, we better talk about multiple sclerosis today. So I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's just being surrounded. I think I'm fortunate because I live with my support group, and and it's just like, because Jennifer, I mean, we don't, because we don't deal with the exact same things. I wouldn't know what it's like not to walk, but Jennifer wouldn't know what it's like to run and not feel your legs, and just those kinds of things, or just the numbness in your hands, because keep in mind, I mean, I write, so I type all day, and so my hands, I think it's just like at least a couple, 3, 4, 5, 8 times a week, just Jennifer just to rub my hand, just to wake them up. So, but that's what the group is, and Jennifer used to lead the group down in Flint, Flint. Yeah, so.
And our group was more information oriented. And it was just like, we were fortunate down in Flint, we had 5, 6 neurologists in the city alone. And so we would have different speakers talk about health issues, or we had access to 3 different hospitals right there in Flint. So we would just information, and not so much, I mean, certainly support, but we didn't just sit and talk as much as we do here in Alma. So. But the MS Society is really good. It's a good referral place for someone that's newly diagnosed with MS to help find a group.
Yes, and don't be afraid to refer people to support groups. You know, and national, you know, it's just in my experiences, the National MS Society is just a good, you know, resource for all the information. So
Accurate information too, and not kooky. I mean, I'm all for alternative therapy, but sometimes you're just like, you want me to do what? You know, and so the MS Society is a good place to say, no, that is kooky information, or no, that'll work. No.
anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, so you gave us tips as far as therapists, but when you guys get somebody new, say to your group that has newly been diagnosed, what would be your best point of advice for them?
Get on an immune modifying drug, immune modulating drug. There are 4 injectables, and Dan takes one and I take the better one, thank you. I'm just kidding, no disrespect to Betaseron.
I only have to shoot every other day. How often do you have to shoot?
I have to shoot every day, but still, get on one of those immune modulating drugs and get exercise. I really think exercise is super important because that will make you feel a little more empowered, that you can take care of yourself.
And I think that's the big thing I tell group members, everybody, is just like, you know, you've got to be your own best advocate. You know, obviously there's resources out there, you can find it and stuff, but you know, you've got to want it, and you've got to go out and just like, you know, find these things, find the drugs, or work for yourself. Because yeah, I would never run. I mean, I would have never, you know, if I would have just sat around, you know, feeling sorry for myself, would I have ever met, you know, the love of my life right there, you know, that I went out and did that, you know, I started a support group, I did this. I mean, be involved, because I think that's where, you know, the whole, where you kind of reserve yourself. If you're sitting in your house just worrying about it, you know, that's when it's bad. But it's just like, no, you know, we've got MS, and it's just like, but we continue to do and push yourself and live your life as best you can. I mean, you know, whatever your ability. I mean, it's just like, so I run, Jennifer can't, but she, you know, in turn, she rides her arm bike and she has the pulleys on the door, you know, just do what you can to stay active, to be engaged, to be involved, because then all of a sudden you feel like there's other people counting on you to get something done, rather than just saying, oh, I don't want to do it today. Well, Jennifer, I didn't want to run, but Jennifer's like, I need you to be healthy for me, you know, so that's what I'd tell them. Yeah.
You guys touched on alternative therapies briefly. Have either of you tried any alternative types of therapy?
I guess how alternative are you talking? Because I mean, you know, as far as like just the vitamins and stuff, or like ginseng, ginkgoba, and all that, those kinds of alternative, or are you thinking even more drastic?
That, or like, I know you mentioned one of your friends did yoga. I don't know if either of you tried like yoga or tai chi, anything, you know, outside of maybe just physical therapy.
I haven't, no. Have you?
Yeah, I did yoga when I could still walk, which is my bad because I could do yoga now, but I did a little bit of yoga and stretched muscles I didn't even know I had, and I've never done anything, you know, there's bee sting therapy and there's more alternative things, but we take vitamin D, a vitamin D supplement every day, because there's thought that MS could be tied to that, and that's a little different, but no, nothing really too kooky.
No, but you know, because I do
and
know.
I say that with the most respect.
Yeah, because I do know I've had friends who have done like the bee sting therapy and everything, and you know, and that's what's so different about the MS is it so much depends on the person, because it's like I'm on the beta-serin, she's on the Copaxone. She tried the beta-serin, it didn't work for her. Worked like perfectly for me thus far. But I mean, people who've done the bee sting therapy, you know. And that's what's so tough with the MS. It's just like such a crapshoot, because, you know, you could get better with no medicine at all, you know, but if you take the medicine and you get better, was it because of the medicine? Was it because of the therapy? You know, it's tough to say, so. Yeah, either or.
Okay. I know heat sensitivity is one of the symptoms with MS. Do you find that a problem exercising or throughout the day or during the summer, and what strategies do you use to control it?
I turn my iPod off because what happens when and I never, ever, ever should have told Jennifer this when we were dating, because I used to live out in the Arboretum apartments outside of town there, and I'd run up and down Lincoln, and when it gets hot, I get vision issues, I just get little spots of little blind spots. Well, you look at something, what happens if this oncoming vehicle's in my little blind spot, So when I get hot, my vision gets a little messed up and stuff. And so when I was out running, I was getting hot, and I was like, I had to turn my iPod off so I could hear whether there were cars coming up the road, because I couldn't see them. So, and that, and I don't, then it's just like, I don't say that that's the best way to take care of yourself, but that's just, but yeah, I do get, it is very, very, very much a problem. It never used to be, but the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's MS or age, so.
And I'm more sensitive to cold. If I get really, really cold, I get really, really, really stiff. And I was at Walmart, and when I was still driving my scooter, and it was very cold out, and I had a humongous spasm, and I went, and I slid all the way out of my chair right onto the floor. And so, fortunately, nice people, Walmart employees, they helped me up into my chair. But if I'm really cold, I get really spastic, and that's probably, and then really hot makes you droopy, but it makes everybody just like, but I would say that's my biggest, the heat sensitivity.
Yeah, because it is a lot of people.
Dan, we're going to chat for this and a strategy for that you think.
Perfect.
We didn't do it last year. We're going to do it this year.
Okay. Yep. All right. So you have a question.
I was wondering, Dan, if when you said that you were doing all the light weights and stuff with the therapist, if you bothered to ask them if you could do something different because you weren't enjoying it, or if you just stopped coming and they were mystified as to why you quit.
Call him out on that. Good job.
I think, thinking back, they did add things because I was doing just a couple deals, but I think it's one of those where at the time when you're newly diagnosed, you're just like, you really don't know what you're looking for. And because then I thought, wanted to go to the therapist. It's not you, it's me. I just think that it was, I think I might have jumped the gun a little even asking for physical therapy. And so, and I do think the one guy was a writer and stuff, and so, you being writers, you kind of just talk about stuff. And I think it was just kind of a mutual breakup. We both agreed we'll just be friends. But, and I think it was just that because I did ask, and they said, oh, well, you need the repetition to build up the stamina. They were thinking more just long-term things, but I think it was just kind of an agreed, this isn't working right now. So, yeah, I should have been more, probably more aggressive in what I was looking for, but at the time I had no idea. And this is where, maybe all your patients wouldn't be like me, but I'm just like, I'm thinking, you're the expert, you know better than I do. So, and no pressure on y'all, but that's like some of your patients will probably be like, well, what do you know? You don't know my body. Others are saying, well, you're the expert, you tell me. So, and I was very much in that camp when I was first diagnosed. It's like, you're the expert, you tell me. And when I'm just like, I wasn't feeling like I was getting anything out of it, I'm just like, I'll stop for now. So, anybody else?
Yeah.
Jennifer, I know you've done 12 years of physical therapy, I think you said. What's one of your favorite exercises or one of the most creative treatments that they've had you do?
Okay, my favorite exercise ever. I hated it, but it was the best exercise. And to do it was just like, ooh, I rock. I can only describe it because I don't know what the name is, but I would call it my Supermans. I would get on all four, and then you take your right arm. Whoops, I dropped my microphone, sorry. You take your right arm and you lift that up, and then you kick your left leg out, and then you put your right arm down and you put your left leg back, and then you do your left arm. So you're like, yeah, that was my favorite exercise, and I thought that was just super, super difficult, but it really, I think that was good. And then this last time, Julie would put a ball, because I obviously can't do that anymore. She would put a ball under my legs, and I would have to move the ball forward and move the ball back. And it was just to get my thighs working, I suppose. So those were two of my favorites. Yeah.
Very fun.
What home modifications have you guys had to make to your house that maybe we wouldn't foresee that you would suggest that we be aware of?
We got off easy. When we first got engaged, and Jennifer was going to move up to Mount Pleasant, you're just like, well, where are we going to live? And we honestly thought we were going to have to build brand new to get something with roll-in shower, wide doors, ramps, and everything. Luckily, a guy I worked with lived across the street from a former McBride group home that had everything. So it's got the ramps in the front, ramps in the back, roll-in shower, tall toilet, the wide doors, barrier-free, one level, and the drawer, and this speak for you, but just in the kitchen there's drawers down below for glasses and stuff and dishes for Jennifer, so it's just so she can set the table. And not that I'm against setting the table, but I'm just but it's just because that's then it's that's what she can do, so she has the glasses and stuff, so keeping things low. What else?
I would say the roll-in shower was probably the biggest thing, because I had lived with my parents and they had a tub shower with a shower bench seat, and I would have to transfer from my chair to the shower seat, and that was difficult, and that got to be really, really difficult. So the roll-in shower, I think, is a huge modification. Grab bars everywhere. Just put them in the bathroom, and really a person with MS is so inventive and so creative. I'm if I don't have a grab bar, I look for the heaviest piece of furniture that I can hold on to, or if I can't reach something, I grab scissors or a long pencil or pen, and it gives me that little bit of reach. So I think just, certainly you want the modifications in your house to make it as easy as possible, but then leave it to the patient to figure out how to do things.
Anybody else?
I'm curious about how the double vision was treated.
Steroids. Yeah. And as much as I advocate steroids for getting you over an exacerbation, because that'll stop the inflammation, steroids, hello, roid rage. I get insane when I'm on steroids, and I'm like a basket case. And Dan, love him. I don't know how he puts up with me, but steroids kind of stopped the swelling or the inflammation, and my eyes went back to normal pretty quick on. And fortunately, knock wood, that I haven't had any visual problems since then. Yeah.
If not, because it's about 5 to 11, and you all have another class, but I know you'd rather stay here and talk, but
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys
So
for
I'd like to
coming.
thank the Digmanns for coming today.